Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings movie trilogy is iconic, and for many it's the gateway into Tolkien's world. Me personally, it was definitely 100% mine. But let's be honest, it's not exactly a word-for-word retelling of the books. In fact, some of the biggest moments in the films didn't happen quite like that at all. So today, we're diving into the biggest lies the movies told us, from missing characters and changed timelines to entire events that were flipped on their head. We're breaking it all down to show you just how different the Lord of the Rings films really are from Tolkien's original story. Let's look at this today.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Before I get into it, I do very much want to say I am not saying all of these changes are good. I'm not saying all of these changes are bad. I am just pointing them out for what they are. Changes from the books to the movie. So let's have a look at this so-called reluctant king. One of the most consistent misunderstandings introduced by the films is that Aragorn doesn't want to be king. In Peter Jackson's trilogy, Aragorn is portrayed as a reluctant hero. He hesitates, he resists. The idea of taking up the crown is not one he's too keen on. Elrond almost has to push it. He doubts himself, and that's a recurring theme. I don't want this power.
I have never wanted it.
It's compelling drama, and it fits that classic cinematic trope of the hero who must grow into his destiny. But in the books, it's almost the opposite. From the moment we meet Strider in the Fellowship of the Ring, we're not just meeting a wandering ranger, we're meeting a man who knows exactly who he is. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, chieftain of the Dunedain, and the rightful king of both Arnor and Gondor. He's been preparing for this role for decades. He's served in the armies of Rohan and Gondor under other names. He's walked the wilds as a protector of the free peoples, all while keeping an eye on the long game, the return of the king. When Boromir questions him at the Council of Elrond, Aragorn's response is not hesitant, it's proud. He literally says, "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will." And when Elrond sends him the reforged sword Anduril before the Fellowship departs Rivendell, it's a clear sign of Aragorn's readiness. In the films, that moment doesn't happen until the third movie, The Return of the King, but in the books, he's already wielding the Flame of the West during the Fellowship's journey. Jackson's version gave us a more emotionally conflicted king to be, and while that absolutely works on screen, it does smooth away one of Aragorn's defining book traits. His quiet but unwavering nobility. He wasn't running from the crown, he was walking straight towards it the entire time. If we move on to another character who was changed completely, it has to be Faramir. He's thoughtful, wise, and most importantly, he resists the temptation of the ring almost immediately. When Frodo and Sam are captured by his rangers in Ithilien, Faramir quickly understands the danger of the ring and says outright, "I would not take this thing if it lay by the highway." That's a huge moment. It shows that not everyone is weak to the ring's pull, that men like Faramir can be guided by wisdom rather than power. He's a clear contrast to his brother Boromir, and a symbol of hope for the future of Gondor. But in the films, that Faramir is nowhere to be seen, at least not at first. Movie Faramir captures Frodo and Sam, learns about the ring, and then does exactly what Boromir did, tries to bring it to his father in Minas Tirith. He even drags them all the way to Osgiliath before finally letting them go. Now this change was done to increase tension, to add conflict, and to raise the stakes, and from a dramatic standpoint it works, especially if you haven't read the books, but it also completely undermines who Faramir is meant to be. Peter Jackson has said they struggled with Faramir in the writing process, and felt that having him resist the ring right away might feel too convenient after what happened with Boromir. But for Tolkien, Faramir's resistance wasn't a coincidence, it was a point. In the end, the film does bring Faramir back around. By the time of The Return of the King, he's a far more faithful version of the book character, but for many fans, that detour through Osgiliath remains one of the most controversial deviations from the source material. Now, as we've mentioned Return of the King, we got to look at one of the big moments from this movie, and it involves the Dead Men of Dunharrow, also known as the Oathbreakers, who do not fight in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. Their role is significant, yes, but it's rooted in fear not in action. Aragorn calls upon them to fulfill their ancient oath, and with their terrifying presence, he uses them to clear the lands of the south of Sauron's forces. Pirates, corsairs, and enemy troops gathering to reinforce Mordor. When their oath is finally fulfilled, it is then that he takes command of the captured fleet and sails up the Anduin with his own men, arriving just in time to help turn the tide at Minas Tirith. But in the film versions, it's not quite how it plays out, is it? Peter Jackson has the army of the dead follow Aragorn all the way to Minas Tirith, where they unleash a supernatural tidal wave of ghostly destruction on the orcs during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. It's dramatic, it's visually memorable, and it's completely different. The change makes the battle feel more like a foregone conclusion. When invincible spirits can sweep through entire armies, it maybe does remove a lot of the tension and bravery from the moment. In the books, the men of Rohan and Gondor fight and bleed and die for that victory. In the film, the ghosts do most of the work. This shift turns the army of the dead from a psychological weapon into a deus ex machina. It simplifies the battle stakes, and arguably takes away from some of the heroism of the living, of Éomer, of Éowyn, of Merry, and of Aragorn himself. Still, you can see why maybe it was done. It makes for an incredible spectacle on screen, but it also fundamentally alters one of the most important battles in Middle-earth's history. Now we move on to a change that even many die-hard fans consider one of the biggest omissions from the entire trilogy. In Tolkien's book, The Return of the King, it doesn't end with the coronation of Aragorn or Frodo's departure to the west. No, the journey home still holds one final, painful chapter: the Scouring of the Shire. When the hobbits return to the Shire, they find it overrun and corrupted. Trees have been cut down, industry has crept in, familiar faces are missing or imprisoned. And at the centre of it all, a bitter, broken Saruman, hiding behind the name of Sharky, and ruling over the Shire through manipulation and thuggery. Wormtongue is there too, reduced to a wreck of a man. But the real point of this chapter isn't just to wrap up Saruman's arc, it's to show how much the hobbits have changed. Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin have truly grown. They're no longer just country folk, they're leaders, they're warriors, they're protectors. And when faced with tyranny in their own homeland, they rise to meet it. Not with the help of wizards, or elves, or kings of men, but on their own. It's the culmination of their character growth, and a reminder that even the smallest corners of the world can't escape the shadow of great events. The films? They skip this entirely. We never return to a troubled Shire. Instead, Frodo simply fades away. Sam marries Rosie, and the credits roll. It's a neater ending, sure, but arguably less powerful. The Scouring was never just about cleaning up the Shire. It was about closure, it was about growth, and it was about showing that the journey changes everything. Peter Jackson has said it would have felt like too much of an epilogue for the audience, and really there is a good chance he's right with that when you really think about it. After all, people had complained there were too many endings as it was. Imagine there was an entire extra arc at the end of it all. But for the readers, it was never an extra chapter. It was the final test. And it really mattered. But thinking of the Hobbits, specifically Frodo now, one of the biggest misconceptions from the films is that Frodo heroically chooses to destroy the ring at the last second. In Peter Jackson's version, we see Frodo teetering on the edge, caught between the pull of the ring and his better nature, until Gollum's intervention ultimately causes its destruction. But in the book, Frodo doesn't choose to destroy it at any point. He claims it. He puts it on. At the very crack of doom, after all the pain, sacrifice, and miles walked, Frodo finally succumbs. He says, "I have come, but I do not choose now to do what I came to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine." And that's the end of his willpower. The ring wins. And this isn't a failure of writing. It's the point. Frodo was never meant to be a flawless hero. He was a vessel, a bearer of immense burden. Tolkien deliberately wrote the ring as something that could not be overcome by mortal strength alone. It's not about resisting forever. It's about how the mercy and pity shown to Gollum earlier saves the world when Frodo can't. Because it is Gollum dancing with glee with the ring in his hand, who ultimately trips and falls into the fire, destroying it and himself. Frodo doesn't defeat evil by being stronger than it, but by choosing mercy again and again, even for someone like Gollum. The film shifts this subtly. It still includes Frodo's moment of claiming the ring, but plays it more like a fleeting lapse rather than a total surrender. He is the one who takes Gollum over the edge. Gollum still falls, but it feels like a final struggle rather than a moment of grace and doomed intertwined. In the movie, he's willing to go down with the ring and Gollum. And it's understandable. Cinema often wants its heroes to have agency. But Tolkien's version is deeper, more tragic, more honest. It tells us that even the best of us can fall, and that's why we must never stop showing mercy along the way. But if we take a sidestep for a moment now, in the films, let's look at Arwen. After all, she gets a much bigger spotlight than she ever did in the books, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. She's not just the love interest waiting in Rivendell anymore. She's riding through forests, defying her father, and even carrying Frodo across the ford of Bruinen while facing down the Nazgul. None of that happens in the books. In the Fellowship of the Ring, it is the mighty elf lord, Glorfindel, the one of great power, who finds Frodo and carries him on horseback to safety. Arwen isn't even present in this scene. Her expanded role in the films replaces Glorfindel entirely, and she's woven more deeply into the fabric of the story from then on. Now, some of this comes from Tolkien's own appendices. There is a touching love story between Aragorn and Arwen hidden away at the back of the book, and Jackson and Co. simply brought that forward. And even then, they changed the emotional dynamic. In the film, Elrond warns Aragorn that Arwen's love will doom her. He claims that she will suffer endless sorrow if she stays, and that she'll diminish and go into the west. He even tries to get her to leave Middle-earth altogether. But here is the twist. Elves can't just sail away willy-nilly to avoid their sadness. The choice to stay or go isn't just an emotional decision, it's a metaphysical one. Arwen has chosen the fate of men, a permanent change that ties her life to Aragorn's, and ensures she will die one day. Her decision is set before the events of the story unfold. She doesn't need Elrond's warning. She already made her choice. The films add a ticking clock, an emotional ultimatum, and a dramatic father-daughter conflict. And sure, it does add to something on screen, but in Tolkien's world, Arwen's choice is quieter and far more poignant. She chooses mortality willingly, not under pressure. She chooses love and the sorrow that must come with it. It is a subtle shift, but it transforms her from a timeless elf making a noble choice into a more tragic, hesitant figure swayed by others. And now we move on to a big one, and that is Denethor. After all, the Denethor we meet in Peter Jackson's movies is, well, a paranoid, greasy old man stuffing his face with tomatoes and sending his son to die in a hopeless charge. He's almost cartoonishly bleak, a shadow of a ruler whose madness is on full display. But Tolkien's Denethor, he's a very different kind of tragic. In the books, Denethor is proud, wise, and above all, noble. He's not a lunatic. He's a steward who bears the weight of Gondor's survival on his shoulders. He sees the threat of Mordor more clearly than most, and his decisions, though often harsh, come from desperation, not madness. Most importantly, Denethor knows what's coming. Why? Because he uses the Palantir, a seeing stone that gives him real insight into Sauron's strength. The problem is, Sauron manipulates what Denethor sees. The despair that overwhelms him doesn't come from simple cowardice, it comes from seeing too much, and being led to believe that there is no hope. This context changes everything. Denethor's cold treatment of Faramir in the films also feels exaggerated. In the books, yes, he clearly favours Boromir, but it's not the cruel, seething disdain that we see on screen. It's more about Denethor being a traditionalist. He admired Boromir's martial strength and saw in him the qualities Gondor needed. He still loves Faramir, he just doesn't understand him. And his death? In the book, Denethor's final act is grim, but also poetic. He doesn't run to the pyre screaming like a man possessed. he retreats to the tombs, places Faramir on the pyre beside him, though Faramir is not dead, and prepares for their end with chilling composure. It is a slow, ceremonial farewell, born of sorrow and the belief that all is lost. It's tragic, not frenzied. So yes, Denethor falls, but in the book, it feels like the fall of a once great man worn down by too many years of bearing Gondor's burdens alone. Where the movies gave us a madman, Tolkien gave us a man broken by knowledge, fear, and pride. Now, let's round this off with blitzing through a handful of smaller changes that still stand out to fans of the books. These are no deep dives, and some of these are maybe only shown in the extended versions of the movies, but I thought it'd be fun to go through a few more. Firstly, we have Prince Imrahil missing. Now, I did cover him in a video recently, but of course Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth, who plays a vital role in Gondor's defences in the books, is just left out of the movies entirely. Then we have the removal of the Ent drafts unless you watch the extended editions. In the books, Merry and Pippin drink the waters of Treebeard's Ent drafts, and this makes them grow noticeably taller. This is briefly shown in the extended editions of the movies, but otherwise it's never even mentioned. We also get no Houses of Healing arc. After the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Aragorn heals Éowyn, Faramir and Merry in the Houses of Healing, a moment that ties directly to the prophecy that the hands of the king are the hands of a healer. The films skip over these most important parts, except for a brief show of Éowyn in the extended edition, but it's definitely not emphasised as much. And then we have how Gandalf faces the Witch King in an entirely different location. In the book, they have a suspenseful confrontation at the gates of Minas Tirith, with Gandalf not letting him enter the city. However, this happens on an upper level in the movie, and the Witch King even breaks Gandalf's staff, although doesn't do anything more because the Rohirrim arrive. It's almost all built up with nothing to happen, and the Witch King is made to seem so much more powerful. Then we have Saruman's death that happens in the Shire. In Tolkien's version, Saruman does not die at Orthanc. He escapes, travels to the Shire like we have mentioned, and becomes Sharky. Only then he gets slain by Wormtongue. Okay, yes, he does get stabbed in the back in the extended editions, but if you've only watched the theatrical, you never even know his fate. What about Sam never being tempted by the ring? In the film, Sam hesitates briefly when returning the ring to Frodo, hinting there is a little bit of temptation, but in the book, he gives it back without question or delay. What about the Barrow-wights and Tom Bombadil? This memorable chapter, where the hobbits are captured by the Barrow-wights and rescued by Tom, it just never happens. This is where the hobbits get their blades, the one which Merry has, which leads to the confrontation with the Witch King on the Pelennor Fields. None of this appears in the films, so it is as though Merry stabs the Witch King in the back with any old blade. And what about the timeline being compressed? In the book, 17 years pass between Bilbo's birthday party and Frodo leaving the Shire. In the films, it seems like weeks, if that. Also, there's no Mouth of Sauron in the theatrical cut. That eerie character, the voice of Sauron that we see at the Black Gate, is a tense and vital moment, but in the theatrical cut we don't even get to see him, and in the extended, Aragorn just cuts him down without negotiation, something Tolkien's Aragorn would never have done. We have a massive one as well, with no elves being at Helm's Deep. In the film, they add last-minute arrivals of the elves from Lothlorien to aid in the Battle of Helm's Deep. In the book, this is a battle fought entirely by men. Those elves, they never come. And finally, Legolas's acrobatics are all Jackson. We have that shield surfing moment, the elephant climbing, the mid-air stunts. Well, none of this is from book Legolas. Yes, he is agile and sharp-eyed, but he is not an action movie superhero. And so, there we have it. When adapting something as vast and intricate as The Lord of the Rings, changes are of course inevitable. Time, budget, pacing, and narrative clarity all play a part in shaping a story for the screen. But what's most interesting is which changes were made and what those changes say about the priorities of the film versus the books. Some changes make sense for cinematic impact, others, well, they still spark debates 2 decades later. But whether it's Frodo banishing Sam, Faramir getting a character overhaul, or the complete removal of the Scouring of the Shire, these differences remind us just how much deeper Tolkien's Legendarium runs beneath the surface. Peter Jackson's trilogy is a masterpiece of adaptation, but it is also a reminder that the true heart of Middle-earth still lies in the pages of Tolkien's work. The films captured the spirit, but the books carry the soul. Now it is your turn. Which of these movie changes bother you the most? Are there any that you actually prefer over the book version? Share all your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below. And along with this, if you would like to support the channel in other ways, please consider our Patreon. You can't always rely on YouTube itself, so this extra support will really help the channel stay strong and keep us getting that content out for you. But with that, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.